My name is Tim Waters, and you happen to be sitting right in the geographic center of Ward 1, which I represent. So welcome to Ward 1 and to this remarkable transformation of this. When I went through my orientation a little less than a year ago, as a new council member, I was escorted into this firehouse when it was a dump. And within a very short period of time, it turned into a great community asset. So it's fun to be able to use it today. We're gonna do a couple things before we get into the substance of this program. We're gonna do some introductions, so get ready. I'm gonna ask you to introduce yourselves. But before I do, this is a room full of luminaries, right? So everybody has their bona fides and their experience that they bring into this room. But not everybody in here is an elected official. Right? So I get to introduce our elected officials. Where's the mayor? Mayor Brian Bagley.
Food table.
Surprise, surprise. Mayor Pro Tem is not here yet, but she's coming, I think. Councilmember Bonnie Fenley. Councilmember Joan Peck. I saw Councilmember Marcia Martin walk in, and I think I heard Aaron Rodriguez's voice earlier, but not. I think Aaron's going to be here as well. So with that, why don't we start right here? Just run quickly around the room. Introduce yourself and just your connection to kind of what we're doing here today.
Hi, I'm Dale Rademacher, the General Manager of Public Works and Natural Resources for the city, and I'm really here today to learn from the community and learn from our leaders on really their hopes and dreams and visions of the overall river corridor, and how we as staff can make that happen and with you.
Avram Saunders. I'm with Voices for Children, CASA, which is the court-appointed special advocacy group. We are volunteers who work with kids in the courts.
Dixon.
I'm Dixon Dick with COSOLVE, community co-working space and a hub for entrepreneurship in Longmont.
Kimberly?
Oh, sorry.
Since you're already standing.
I'm moving her around. I get her. Join the table.
And I'm thrilled to be here to talk about how the river corridor works and how we can enhance it and how it's
Ryan McCoy with Front Range Community College.
Harvard Bermudas and I manage community and water resources.
Andy Welch, Ward 1 resident.
Yeah, there you go, Andy.
And,
Sitting by Dixon Dick.
I run some construction and own some property in the river corridor and
Yeah, I do.
Don?
Scott Converse, the publisher of Longmont River and founder of Figure.
Gordon Pedro, 24-year resident.
David Bell, Natural Resources Manager for the City of Longmont.
Olivia, since you're standing.
I'm Olivia Massimino. I own Massimino Development, and we are developing the 280 units on 3rd and Great Western, all multifamily.
So we got to go right to Ben
Yeah.
from there.
And I bet I'm her better half.
All right.
And apparently a liar.
Yes, yes, yeah.
My name is Sharon Malloy, and I'm here representing a group called Stand With Our Same Brain Seat. Growing large group of people who want to see the St. Brain corridor, which is protected and respected.
And then I'm Sandy Valdesero, I'm Vice President of the Golden Gate Campus at Park.
I'm Jody Marsh. I'm the Director of Planning and Development Services for the City of Longmont.
I'm with Liquid Frontier Company's property owner in the corridor.
Jessica.
Jessica.
And then Tony.
Sorry.
No, don't apologize. Introduce yourself.
I'm Jessica Erickson. I'm the President of the Longmont Economic Development Partnership.
Welcome. Tony.
And I'm Tony Chacon. I'm the redevelopment manager for the city of Longmont.
I'm Sandy Cedar. I am the Assistant City Manager, and I'm your facilitator for the day.
I'm Harold Dominguez, I'm the city manager, and I'm here to help Sandy and Councilmember Waters.
There are a number of people who have RSVP'd that they would be here, but we also have had, I suspect, people have experienced the traffic today. Yeah, so rather than wait for everybody and in deference and respect for your time, we thought we'd get started and just fold people in as they come along. So let me really quickly, I'm just going to try to tee this up. and just tell a story that kind of gets us into the work. And here's the first part of the story. Last May 18th, your city council came together in a planning and goal setting retreat. And out of that, or going into that retreat, you should know that we said kind of a mantra to ourselves was, if we're going to do this in the interest of the long-term future of the community, let's go big or go home. Right? We can do this in a lot of different ways, but let's not spend our time thinking small or short-term. Let's think about what's in the interest of this community for the next 100 years, and what will it take in the next decade or so to set up the community for the kind of future that it has the potential to enjoy. And out of that planning retreat came 2 vision statements and 7 goals. And you have in your materials, and I know you can't read this, the font's too small, and I'm not going to leave it up there other than to point to it. 1 vision statement had to do with people, with 3 goal statements. And a 2nd vision statement had to do with place, and 4 goal statements. And your mission, if you're willing to respond to that charge, is to help us translate this vision and these goals into reality. In the materials we sent out to you, we said we're going to promote, when we started thinking about how do we turn words into action, right? How do we move beyond just concepts? Harold and I were bouncing back and forth, creating 2 advisory groups. One to focus on this goal, having to do with housing stock and densities and access to quality transportation and jobs. A 2nd group for goal B2, which is about our environment, and a 3rd group for goals B3 and 4, and thought that's just going to be too confusing. We're going to use the same talent or invite the same talent into each of those conversations, and said let's fold that into one advisory group. My ask today is that we start to focus on goals B3 and B4, but understanding this conversation is going to incorporate, as you envision the future, it will include housing and retail and the environment and all the issues that we know we need to attend to as we go forward with a visioning process. This council was also, acutely aware of the fact that we are all on the clock, right? It's an election year. So this is a really important year for a lot of reasons. One of them is that this council is trying to set up some foundation based on this work for the next council, whoever sits on that council, if that council chooses to pick it up and run with it. Number one. Number 2, we have an opportunity zone that runs along the north side of the river and up to 9th. And while that might not be unique in the history of the world, it's a pretty special opportunity right now. So if you bring the opportunity zone, you bring what we just finished with the land code update and work we still have to do on the land code update. You do what we just finished doing with an affordable housing package, not just an ordinance. And the stars have lined up in a way to say, let's take advantage of this opportunity right now. And let's push this and run with this as far and as hard as we can so that the next council can get a running start if they choose to pick up on what we're doing here today. So these are the 2 goals that we're focusing on primarily. The council itself said to one another, what we really need to do is take this general statement of vision and turn it into something that's potentially transformational for the community, and that's what we're going to ask you to do. We're going to do some more introductions in just a minute. The product of our work should be kind of 3 dimensions. One, that by May 1st, we want a vivid description with a narrative of what you envision along the river. And when we're talking about going big or going home, that doesn't mean small ideas aren't welcome. Every idea is welcome in this process. But we want you to think long-term and we want you to think big. And we want to do this in a way that allows us to have documents, a material, a presentation of some kind, ready to share with the community by the time we get to Cinco de Mayo. Right? So using May 1st and that event and the events over the course of the summer, kind of a bookending with Rhythm on the River as another opportunity and many opportunities in between to invite the community for their input, their critique, comment, hopes, fears, whatever they bring to what you produce over the next couple of months. Process is going to look like, well, here we're going to go there. Here. The second outcome are visuals with a narrative. Today you're going to do a lot of work, I think, on what visuals might be. Harold's lined up some talent following this session to take what comes out of today's session and to bring it back to you with real-time visuals. We're going to ask you to come back in a second session if you're willing to do it. I think on February 15th, have we agreed?
We're going to well, it depends on the availability of the.
We're just make the note to yourself. We're shooting for February 15th, which is a Friday morning, with a third session in September, like September 25th. What we want to do on February 15th is bring back to you the results of what you did today, any input we get in the meantime, give you a chance to polish, and then work on narrative to go with visuals, right, to prepare to share with the community. And by the time we get to September, we'll bring back to you what we've heard from the community based on what you've done, and an opportunity for you then to apply yourselves to what are the action steps you'd like to see any council take. Members of this council, if they're still on the council, certainly this mayor as he carries over.
I appreciate your support.
And
I got to go now.
And the next council to build on the work that you've done. Understanding there's some uncertainties, given the fact that we have election cycles. And then by October 8th, we have a finished product, ready to take back to this council to say, this is how much of it we accept, this is how much of it we still want to work on, but it's going to be a council decision at that point in time. That's what you're getting ready to do, is present something to the council. Council members are here because they're going to be actively involved in the process, but everybody's voice, everybody's ego, and everybody's title got hung at the door when you walked in. Everybody's voice means has equal weight in this process. Now, before I turn this over to Harold, questions or concerns? Yes, sir.
What is the interaction between the two that we're going to work on today and in those meetings that you just talked about and the other goals that have been set? How are they going to be?
Under this vision statement?
Exactly.
Bring it. You bring it today, right? And we'll work on building an integrated, coherent vision for the river that includes housing and our concerns for the environment, even as we're talking about the two of these goals that I have particular interest in today's
this
session.
vision statement with the first vision statement.
We're working on Vision 2 right now.
Okay.
For the places vision.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Anybody else? Ready to go to work? Harold.
Some new people came in. Did they introduce themselves?
More introductions.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. We did a round of introductions before some people came in. We'll start with Kevin.
Kevin Molchan with HMS Development.
Jake.
Jake Spencer, HMS Development.
Andy.
Andy Dorsey from Range Community College.
Alan.
Alan Ginsburg at Newmark Merrill.
Brian.
150 Main.
What did I miss? And that's about everybody who RSVP'd. So thanks to everybody for being here. I'm just now going to join the group.
So Councilmember Waters went over some of the schedules in terms of the meetings and what we're going to do in the graphic representation. I do really want to focus that there will be a parallel community process that he referenced occurring at Cinco de Mayo, Rhythm on the River, so we can involve the broader community. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but what we did want to do is really talk about a lot of things that are coming together, of which many of the conversations that you all are or the points you bring out today, we're going to have to fold into other components of what we're doing as an organization. Specifically related to the other goals, one of the things that the council has worked on, and they spent a lot of time last year, was the inclusionary housing ordinance that they recently adopted. And so that's some of the work that's touched those other processes. Out of that came a series of work products that we're going to provide to the council within the next month throughout the year. We're also then trying to figure out the scheduling and how all of these things come together. So some of the first things you'll see coming forward is if council chooses to adopt it, they've instructed us to bring an ordinance related to special districts and how that can apply to the broader community. You can see affordable housing incentives. Council's also asked us to develop a sustainability environmental system. SES.
Evaluation system.
Evaluation system. Sustainability evaluation system for development. You can see a timeline based on conversations I've been having with the planning department. You'll also see wildlife management plans and then wildlife management related to development, because we're trying to really understand the timing of those two pieces and make sure they're working in concert with each other. Council also wanted us to bring back codes related to developments near public lands and developments near riparian areas, and that's part of the work product. Then we throw in public improvement design standards, lean process improvements, and then at the bottom you see a Main Street corridor plan that really stretches through the year. And then we have the work that you're obviously all aware of, which is the RSVP project related to flood control along the river. And I stopped that at 2.9, but it's actually going to go much further than that. It just really adjusted the graphic. We're going to be taking this information. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, you didn't have to interrupt the sentence. I was just going to observe, aren't there also perhaps, we need November, what is it, 8th? Is a milestone date on there, because aren't there going to be some ballot initiatives in support of this?
Correct.
Seems like those are worth mentioning.
Correct, and so the council did direct us last Tuesday for 2 ballot initiatives. One is to take the 20-year lease off, or to take a ballot initiative so that we're not restricted to leases being 20 years or less. And I just dropped the other one.
Street tax.
The street tax, to have bring a ballot initiative before the community so that instead of having a sunset period, that is a street tax in perpetuity. Those will all fall in this. I didn't put those in here because the work that you're going to be doing today directly feeds into all of these processes. And we're going to be taking this information. We have a meeting on the 22nd with the council where we're going to begin the conversations with the council. We're going to be pulling this information and presenting it to them as part of the other work they've directed us to do. Then we have another meeting on the 29th where we're going to bring that information to get the policy direction from the council. These are merely estimates in terms of what we think we can do. We will be working to get specific direction from council to see what is their priority, and obviously that may adjust some of these timelines depending on what the council wants us to work on and what they want to move to the top of the list. Are there any questions about this? I know it's a quick overview.
Drew, do you want to talk about the map and the maps that are on everybody's tables?
All right, gotcha. So you have a number of maps. We tried to do it in one map, and as you can see, there are a lot of different components that start coming into play. In the area that we're talking about today, pardon? Mike. So we're going to do, there's some chairs with spots available back there.
We'll reconfigure everybody once we're
So there's not going to be a lot of talking from the front of the room today. Once we get through this, we're going to really, it's about engagement and start getting input from everyone else. So we will readjust once we get through with this. So what you will see, and you have the individual maps, is you have a map that shows the enterprise zone, you have a map that shows the opportunity zone, you have a map that shows the southeast urban renewal area. These components all start lining, or as you layer them on top of each other, they all present different opportunities that the community has available to them to take advantage of and that the council will consider. Where these components start changing a little bit is basically the time restrictions that are associated with each one of these opportunities. I'm looking at Jessica. The enterprise zone is 20 years, correct?
no,
10 years. The enterprise zone is 10 years, but as Councilmember Waters talked about the opportunity zone, there are more restrictions in terms of that timeline. And you know, as a rule of thumb for folks to consider, if you purchase a piece of property, you have to then start turning dirt within 30 months of the purchase of that property. And that has to be done within this calendar year. So there are also things that come into play that also create other timing issues that have to be considered.
Carol, you can also add that we're pursuing enterprise zone boundary alignment this year to expand the enterprise zone area. So as we're looking at some of this stuff, looking at where it makes sense to do that in support of this work as well.
So a lot of opportunities that are coming together that you all can consider as we're moving through this conversation. Anything else, Sandy?
That's it.
Now it's your turn.
Okay, that's my turn.
Okay, so we're gonna reconfigure just a little bit since we had some more people that just came in.
Just before you reconfigure and start the next section, which is what, at 9:30?
Mm-hmm.
I do have some questions about what Harold presented, if he's doing, and it's appropriate.
Absolutely.
I have a couple things on the.
Sure.
This would be the right time.
Fire away.
So the number of ordinances and projects that you said that you're expected to do, and I'll just name a couple of them. Spatial districts, I don't have a clue what that means, but I am concerned about the evaluation system. I take that to mean the evaluation system of projects.
Correct. So let me answer the special district. The council gave us direction to bring an amendment to the special district ordinance that basically where it restricts it for residential development in the current ordinances. The direction the council gave us was to bring back an ordinance removing that restriction. That's the special district piece. The sustainability evaluation system, what council has asked us to do, you may or may not know, we did one in terms of how we evaluate our own internal public infrastructure projects and determine what the impact is to the environment and how we're approaching it. We can weigh it against each other. The city council has asked us to build one of those systems that does the same thing for private or for commercial residential development activities. That's really that's what that means.
Okay, so using that as a drop-off point, it seems to me like I'm here to try to make sure that what Councilmember Waters said about getting the community to have this mixed city council buy into this process is to have the community so committed to this that the next city council will have no choice but to buy into it. So that's what I would like to see come out here. But I do have a little bit of concern about, it's hard to get enthusiastically involved in saying this is what we're going to do when I don't have a clue what the evaluation system is going to include and how that's going to make sure that the public interest is as equally involved in these evaluations as the
Correct.
private interest and the collaboration and the partnership. So that is like this great big hole in my thinking, and it's going to be something that's going to be difficult for all of us to deal with, I do believe, because I think it's important.
Correct, and so I think that's why we said there's a lot of paralleling that's going to be incorporated in this. I will let Councilmember Waters jump in and talk about some of this, but part of it is to establish what are the opportunities and what are the, as the term we used when we went through the goal setting, the big, hairy, audacious goals, if you're familiar with Good to Great, and really start outlining those components and taking that and understanding what that looks like and then blending it with the public involvement that we're going to go through in terms of developing that evaluation system so they're moving together. We do realize there's a point here where everything, and when you start looking at that May 1st timeline, that's where things really have to start coming together to answer a lot of your questions.
Maybe the only thing I would add, Gordon, is that if we had this conversation, there's a dependent sequencing of a number of things, right? For my purposes, updating the land code, the amendments to the land code that still have to be, those parts of the land code that still have to be amended. Amending the land code without having completed the work on a new way to score or evaluate proposed development projects makes no sense. And you're going to just do another amendment. So this process that we're in right now can't roll up to a recommendation without the things that we're talking about here getting resolved during the course of the year to be factored into whatever a final proposal is to the council. But if we wait till all that's done, it's 2020. So we're either going to wait till 2020 to get this process started, or we're going to launch today in knowing that those are the things that are working in parallel. The legislative actions that the council has to take to make this process reflect our best and highest hopes for the river corridor, for housing, and all the other things we talked about. You know, we either wait or we get started and start to fold these things in as we go along.
So I just want to comment, I'll be quiet. So the problem or the thing that comes about is that great opportunities, but if we don't have the boundaries, and we don't have anything to say this is what the public can expect, when you go to the voters this fall for two things, that they're changing our charter, then some of us are going to say, well, we don't have a clue what this means. Why should we vote for this when we don't have a clue what it's going to mean to our community? So I'm just trying to lay out that there's some clarification that's going to have to come out of this process, or you're going to have some of the community opposing things that might be good opportunities, but without an understanding, we're not going to be able to support it. And that's the end of my comment.
The only comment I would make, I don't want to go too far down the path of what we asked to come back in the form of charter change or the repeal of the metro or special district ordinance. I will say this: if this group was never convened, if we hadn't done anything with this kind of goal setting process, we would be in a conversation about changing the charter, simply because there have been too many other discussions that have surfaced in the last 6 months about public-private partnerships, where having nothing to do with the river corridor or Main Street, simply opportunities where somebody's willing to invest in the community in a way that benefits the community on the development side, unwilling to do it because the constraint on a 20-year lease. The city can't commit itself for more than 20 years, and amortizing investment over that period of time ain't gonna work on the development side, having nothing to do with the issues we're talking about here. So that would be on the ballot no matter what. Now, we'd have to make the case to the community that's obviously worth changing the charter, but we'd make that case regardless of what came out of this process. So we got the Metro District was, actually that was part of our inclusion, that was part of the housing package, right? We made a commitment. We're gonna come back to the council, at least for us to consider amending or, I guess, repealing the constraint on residential special districts as part of that housing package. So that's water that's under the bridge in terms of our commitment to consider.
And just so he's not up here championing this by himself, you'll notice that this isn't a room full of developers. Your concerns are shared by many people in this room, and this is literally a tabula rasa. This is day one, and we want to make sure that as we talk about what's going to happen in this area, that the concerns that you're talking about are met. I mean, you'll see, I think it's ironic. Sherry Malloy and Steve Tebow sitting side by side as we start this process.
But I am outnumbered.
You are outnumbered. But my point is that the voices will be heard, and at this point, there is no plan. There is no plan. All there are hopes, dreams, fears, concerns, and we need to make sure that those are all heard as we move forward. And the whole idea isn't, well, we have a plan and we want people to think that you're getting buy-in. There really is no plan, and we'll develop it together.
I don't want to turn this into a raffle either, but there is one thing that Gordon asked that didn't get mentioned or didn't get elaborated, I guess, and that is what the SES is about in terms of turning it outward. And the word you said, Gordon, is boundaries. And you may remember that council was directed staff to bring every variance request along the St. Vrain corridor before council. And although it's not the only purpose, the primary purpose in my mind at least is to establish that if we grant variances, it is done fairly, not based on influence, and that the ecological requirements of preserving that corridor are always met, that there is an objective threshold set. So just wanted to get that out there. All right, I'll shut up.
Other questions? I just have one quick comment, and not something that we have to necessarily address today, but just something to keep in mind is that there are a couple of parallel efforts happening at the same time. So Councilman Waters has been working with us, and some of the city staff have been working with us on the development of the community investment perspectives for Opportunity Zone. So we want to make sure that the two align and aren't sending a different message, and the timing doesn't necessarily work well for that. But a conversation we can definitely have offline. And then also the update of the advanced Longmont strategy that many of the people in this room have also been working on. which I think is a little bit more flexible in terms of being able to incorporate some of this stuff into over time. But we'll want to have a conversation about making sure that the two are aligning, so we're not going in different directions or sending different messages.
Correct, and I think that's part of what I said earlier. We will be taking this information, and we have a list of things that are occurring that we just talked about briefly here. We know we have other things, and it's pulling all of that information and then having those conversations to make sure that there is alignment and that we're all moving in the same direction. And to your point, when I stated there are certain components that exist today that will not exist in perpetuity just because of the way they were designed. And those things need to be brought into that evaluation.
Just make one more comment. We've all been through these kinds of experiences where everybody walks through the room with their own sets of worst fears and best hopes for whatever the outcome is going to be. And if anybody pays attention to what shows up in council meetings on Tuesday nights, it's almost always worst fears. We hear it Tuesday night after Tuesday night after Tuesday night. Every once in a while we hear a best hope. Generally it's the worst fears. And everybody in this room brought in worst fears. If you're in development, if you're on the development side, you brought about your worst fears about the constraints that the council are going to bring to the development process. If you're concerned about the river, you're going to bring your worst fears about us making reckless decisions. Everybody brought them in. We're not going to spend time listing them, but we ought to acknowledge that they exist. But you also brought best hopes. And my hope is that that's where we go with this conversation, recognizing we can make some bad decisions and we need to regulate ourselves and hold ourselves accountable. But if we're driven by the worst fear, we're going to end up in one place that's very different by our best hopes for what we do for this community between now and 2030 that sets it up for for the next century. And I know that's hyperbole, but we also know that's how great things happen, right? That's how great cities become great cities. So I don't want to be constrained by worst fears, knowing that we have to pay attention to them.
Good, thank you. That's a great setup. Yeah, that's exactly right. This is an exciting day. So I want to point out a couple things on your tables. You have this overview map that gives you kind of some of the ideas of the opportunity zone and the enterprise zone and the DDA boundaries and all that kind of stuff. You also have individual maps. You'll notice that there's like 5 different boundaries that we're talking about on this one map. Most of your tables, except for the very back corner one, have also individual maps. All of these are in this overview. It's just the 5 different segments of that in case you want to look closer. You also have some sticky notes. We're going to use those a little later. You're welcome to take notes on them. I also have some paper. If you need paper, if you need a pen, let me know. We're going to use these a little bit later as well as the little ones. So that's kind of part of the individual exercise. You also should have a few of the agendas, which was send out to you ahead of time along with all of the different maps. You should also have the agenda. If you need agendas, I have a couple extras up here. There should be about 3 per table, but I have some more up here if you need one of those. So I'm going to reconfigure a little bit because this is the end of the talking head portion. And so I recognize everyone's kind of smashed in and I appreciate that, but at this point we can now kind of move ourselves around the tables. What I would like to do though is I would really like for you all to go to different tables. I know you love each other a lot, and I'm hoping that you can scatter amongst the different tables. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, all of you that are kind of sitting in the corners and in weird spots, if you can come up to this table, and we'll kind of reconfigure what this looks like. There should be 1 staff member at every table, but I should be clear the staff members are also here to brainstorm and to be part of that conversation. They're also supposed to be the naysayer busters. So if somebody at the table starts to bring in too much reality, the staff member might turn around and say, okay, it's time to get back to the good stuff.
You just stay here with us at this table?
Oh, do you want me to?
Joan, everybody, Joan. Good people, I thought you were great. Oh, sure, whatever.
How about
I would like to be
I would love to take a table and use that. That's the idea. The only other staff member goal was that if things start to go too far one direction, yeah, try to bring it back out to the big.
That's just for us, it's not being broadcast.
Okay, all right. I wasn't sure.
So why do we need to talk to
All right. While you're moving, feel free to grab the
I guess my biggest is they're trying to make a decision on this thing. That's one thing. They're just going to be basically. I mean, I'm glad to attend, but what I'm hearing on the paper is leave it. If you want me there, I'll be
I may have to. I just gotta pick a class. I'm gonna get these.
Yeah, we're gonna have that.
I mean, that's
I'm so happy to see you going vertical.
Great.
Yeah.
Maybe another council tour. Get you guys out there.
Okay, it's time to find your seat.
They might need a hard hat.
We need hard hats.
And
Well, that's funny you say that. And he's like, I got my hard hat.
Yeah, you got it. Somebody, I would like to talk the service for the trail. Because that is what they're on. Okay, everybody situated? Come over and say, too lazy to listen.
all right.
My voice works. All right, let me give you some instruction for your conversation. I know that you all introduced yourself to the big group as you came in, but you're welcome to do another round of introductions with each other. And as you do, my hope is that you start to talk a little bit about what your highest hopes are for the river corridor. I want to remind this group that what your charge is, this panel will start with the geographic region, which is the St. Vrain River Corridor. Those are the maps that you have here, to create a breathtaking, transformational vision for the corridor that will propel Longmont as a nationally recognized geographic center of science, technology, engineering, arts, and entrepreneurship. At the same time, balancing the environmental needs. It's a pretty big order. Are you ready to get started? Very good. Okay, so on your agenda and on the front are some of the questions I'd like for you to consider. If you have more than 5 or 6 people at your table, I want you to kick someone off your island and put them in this back table over here, because it's a little too much. 5 people. 6 is barely. You have 7. Someone needs to come back over to this table. So you guys seem to have like 12. 4, 6, 8. Yeah. Just go back here and.
Readers or you?
One of you guys, if you can come back to this table.
Jay, this is for Kevin.
Thank you.
It's been nice knowing you, Jay.
Yep, appreciate it.
Don't take it personally. I'll carry it with you.
Mayor, would you mind flipping that direction? Oh, yeah.
Everybody go down staff.
I think you get more out of the conversation if there are less people at your table. That's my thought. You're moving, David. I'm like, now go there, now go there. Okay, how are we doing?
What's your favorite town?
All right.
With Joe going through?
It would have to be Fort Collins because
All right.
yeah, it's north on the river, so.
Thank you all. I want to give a little extra room, a little extra talk space.
We don't talk about Miami.
Okay.
Are we to record? I like Anchorage too.
No.
Okay.
Okay, here are your instructions. This is a free-flowing and big-picture conversation. What I want for you to talk about at your tables is really what's the highest vision. What are the wackiest, craziest, coolest ideas that you have for what happens at the river corridor, right? And that's going to really focus on the areas that we just talked about as far as science, technology, engineering, education, arts, entrepreneurship, and environment, right? Those are the kind of the areas we want for you to focus on. But as Councilmember Waters said, we want you to go big, really big, really big. No bad ideas. Everything is really on the table. This is a free-flowing conversation, does not need to be recorded at your table. If you find that that's helpful, that you'd like to, you're certainly welcome to do that. The staff members at your table have been chosen because of their big picture abilities as well. So their only job at your table is to stop the naysaying if it starts to happen, or to make sure that the conversation continues to stay at the very, very highest level. Right? So I don't know what David's going to need for that, but I'm sure it'll be okay. If you need to use the restrooms, they are out the door this way. If you need coffee or you need food, please just get up and get it. This is a free-flowing and open conversation, and the questions we'd like for you to consider include things like, what are the greatest possibilities as we continue river restoration and envision future development? How do we preserve the natural beauty of the area? How do we attract a stronger presence of higher education? Hey, David, hang on, not yet. Not yet, you're almost there. What opportunities do we not want to miss, given the opportunity zone? At the end of our group conversations is when we're going to use these sticky notes, and I want for you to then write some of your ideas on these. The bigger sticky notes are going to be for general ideas. The little sticky notes are going to be for ideas that you have that go along with a particular geographic place. You may notice there's a gigantic map over here. Once we're done with our group conversations and brainstorming to kind of bring up the highest level of ideas, we'll be asking you to write on the little sticky notes ideas that maybe have a geographic tie. Ideas that don't particularly have a specific geographic tie, then we'll put on the bigger stickies and we'll put them up on this board here. So feel free to use those stickies as you go for the ideas that you have that you'd like to contribute to the cause afterwards.
So could you tell us the boundaries? So the northern boundary along the river.
I would state the obvious here. This is kind of interesting. I hadn't thought of it. So if you take this reach, let's call
Considers
it
all of downtown and
from
everything
here,
else.
Right, it gets
from
all
here
sorts of
to
things.
here. About 50% of it on the north side is nature open space, right? Open space, open space. I don't know what that is.
So the large
Open
map-
space,
They're
right? So
defining the boundaries of this right now.
50% of it already nature. Jonas
The
going
yellow
over the topic.
outline that's right here is really the first and main TOD area. The TOD, transportation oriented development. Oh, you just want north and south, so we are going all the way up to Roosevelt Park.
which would be the DDA boundary on this map. All the way south, it looks like down to Bowen with the enterprise zone, which is the purple line that goes all the way south down to like as far as Kanemoto Park. So it's a pretty broad mix. Then it goes all the way out to where Third and Ken Pratt meet up past the Sugar Mill, just a bit to the east. And it looks like our end boundary over here is, since we're talking about the river corridor, I assume we're going to go all the way out to Airport Road. But
No, Rogers Grove.
So here's Isaac Ball.
Isaac Ball and Rogers Grove, sort of, that's, Hover is a boundary based on what the council talked about.
Yep.
Sugar Mill is the eastern boundary. Depending on where you are, I mean, I would say Third is the northern boundary, and look to Boston as the southern boundary.
Harold, so I might point out there's a 32-acre, roughly 32-acre assembly opportunity just west of Hover along the river. The Betcher's family is currently doing an annexation proposal. I would suggest that we not preclude going on the west side of Hover. There's a major transportation.
And that's fine, and that could be, I just said
As
Hover.
far as Golden Pond, somewhere in there, I think should be included in our thinking.
Just west of Hover. Eastern boundary, Sugar Mill. Northern boundary, Third, which is, I mean, because it'll mix the Third and First depending on where you are and how you have residential areas. And then really, I guess Boston is probably the best in terms of the river corridor street use.
Well, I think, again, if we're already constraining our ideas
Yeah.
about streets, maybe not.
That's the hard part. I would say 119.
Great point. I would say everything on the map is fair game. Are you ready to go?
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to check in 30 minutes, but go ahead and start your conversations now. Maybe introduce yourself and talk about your greatest love for the river.
Kevin, I'm sorry, I don't know you.
Kevin Molchak.
Just have one other feature.
There's a good chunk of it, starting out of the 319 and coming in, especially on the north side, that is either existing owned or public works street plan. Old County and the city have open space the Dickens nature area, which is pretty much what we're talking about, vision and full stop, right in the center of the city. And as you continue going west, you come into Rogers Grove. Well, first you have Razor Walters, which is another cool amenity that is there. Go through the west, you're in the whole Rogers Grove. So, yeah, there is which is why I think there's a lot of interest and focus on having exciting new options for economic development, but also acknowledging and preserving the beauty that's out there and making that as a very part of what we're doing. All the way down to, the linear wildlife corridor moved through that area in an urban setting. It's something many cities would love to have. And we have it. We can preserve it, we can take it forward. And again, I think it should be a value added kind of proposition.
We have zero specific interest
in a particular area.
Not developing the corridor, but frankly, this corridor is good for all.
Exactly.
For the entire city, the region.
And I guess what I'd like to understand is, this is our now mind.
There still some issues south.
I just keep on driving past places where you're getting these money out of wow, it's all it's beautiful assets. I don't like that. what does the city do come up with visions where we do everything north and south goes out of the city? Yes, it's been headquarters here, there's a board of campus here. So do all that. So that's what I said to my shoulders. The city have a lot of assets along the way, like
And there's another, you want to say that city land, I have a map of it. Boston.
So you have a lot of assets in one.
Yeah, there's city-owned property in addition to the industrial area. I don't know how huge they are. Private homes are, once you're out of those areas, by far the largest. Yeah, look at
I'd like to throw out a question though, as we're hearing big ideas. What is it that we can do in Longmont that would make Longmont a place where people want to invest? Because right now we have discriminating, why hasn't we solved it?
how are we going to make it?
Yeah, exactly. And what, for example, when you look at what brings people into other cities, they are mid-centers, they are, and that encourages economic development around that because they know there will be people. So I think the big picture has to be, what are we going to do? What is it that will make Longmont a destination? Other than just
defined by the rainmaker clearly refers to the tomato living, saying our premise was, well, Longmont is so much more affordable and older.
No.
What am I saying? Oh, we can say that. And what is the but the cereal there's not we have a lot of suppliers. So rainmaker, so there are lots of districts and general districts like rivers and arts, innovation. If I was looking at this rebranding acres, these are actually, I still think people are Main Street Seattle has a because I think eco district and you can do some things educationally where people can walk through. So eco district is also I think that's working strategy, but I think that's involved.
I don't either, and South Main Street is where I think we need to actually focus coming into Longmont from that direction. Because it has pretty much a Colfax, an old Colfax mill. South Main. And I, okay, I'm just gonna throw out another thing, because I love what you're doing with your and the broad formation of the other side. I think that having this out there where people can gather drinks and stuff before or after a concert and recognize wildlife and waterfalls and other people join. Huge asset around Business Park.
There's all this open space and all this natural area. There's 2 spots that are programmed right now where you can actually go and have a picnic. And it's not, this isn't quite done yet. This, are both like I go just out there for your kids. I don't go down here with my kids. It's open space.
And to be honest, on this one path, so it's slated to travel. That's about to start.
But not here.
But you have these nodes that ultimately will lead to something.
A lot of lakes.
It will lead to something close to what you see as the Dickens pictures. Once that happens,
a lot of so what I'm suggesting is a lot of what we started this program is out there for some really powerful
they have
words
the same
to bring quality and stakeholders and bring
any place in America, the street rep, just so I was to put their corporate headquarters Linden, that's the north side. It's the north side of the river. They've seeded it. The hardest thing you have is getting close to the city because you can't really keep everybody's got an acre, 2 acre parcel.
See, that's the difference here, though. There's some large tracts of land. We have 12 acres here. There's some big tracts.
So I think there's some parcels that coming up with other plans to implement.
If you see if that is the transportation, 387 is bus rapid transit. The train station right across from the and trains going to be put in there. So you have the network. The problem with bicycle walking is the transportation. Sunset Street is too narrow. And Boston is way too
Crazy big transit idea.
What's this one? Rushmore. So yeah, I go and park around the Grove. We'll go walk down on the river to walk.
No, I'm talking about
Were you trying to bring people in? One of the things I wanted to do for couldn't get enough support for, I think, which was east-west, breweries around the mountain, was, again, it's a big idea, just to create a community trolley, that connects through, if you can tie your breweries, businesses around town, and, you can't start with that, but you can find it for and it creates a cohesiveness by its nature. It has to be unique in the way it's built. And it can be a wheel trolley, it's not going to be a rail trolley.
And I'll say, as a community, we have really serious cost issues and had a hard time revisioning and getting the entire sugar factory area revisions and redone. And talk about something that could be a placeholder. As you come in, imagine coming to just fresh but that is a huge ask. It's like, and as you enter the city, because that was something other. This big metal building. Imagine that being a bustling center of whether it's social and then you tie a convention center kind of thing. I don't know if that's too far from your vision of what you're thinking, but
I asked the developers, why don't you gotta ask that. There, and they just want to. But the other thing that was brought up, I had the other day, was that this whole sugar mill thing. Is picking up the historic value of Longmont. They're thinking that, what if we had a mill there and local farmers would mill and have residential areas with restaurant, a bakery, and make it.
The thing is, you don't have any density over here. No density, that's the problem.
But they were looking, the people I was talking to, and I think this is an idea to throw out, not out of the realm of who we are historically, that they liked it because of they bring their flour and corn or whatever because they're always.
No, that all makes sense, but once you get what's going on down the Rhino and Denver, these food halls and all this cool stuff.
But
Everybody's got to get in the car to go here.
And that is, the railroad will right by it.
To your point with the trolley, you could use these tracks to run a.
Exactly.
But you really got to get that station, in.
And that's where we need the help of the business community.
There's gonna be
Where I was going with this
coming up with that rail going through west.
Yes.
Once,
Helps develop. So that's what we do.
community should be
Whose mind is like, so one thing.
It was always part of the BNSF system, but it is almost at this point a spur that goes up to seniors, and there's very little of it. So the tendency of the railroad is going to be that, if we act at the right time.
We're talking about this here.
Because you can do all kinds of
You know the guy who wrote?
You mean, Rowan? I know Mr. The guy out of Longmont, the investor. I don't know. You could be right, Alan, I don't know. Somebody and it's the same thing with these empty spur lines. It's to not let
That's important. Seeing it not, it's really this section right here. But I guess the point I was making is you got a hub here of open space, you can identify around it, you got another one here, and then you put the station in. Why is it now you can basically expand this? Because I don't see this area changing too much anytime soon. So the Boston Avenue area,
You know what, that's the original Longmont business park.
Right, because
1960s era kind of development that I think if somebody might be a person.
well, they already done it, so their walls is basically everything.
That is for,
So his stuff there, we own this 5 acre piece right here. There's a Boston, north of Boston, between Gay and Bowen.
That's not the budget.
No, it's on the other side, it's over here.
Oh, by Gay.
Between Gay and Marcy.
By
the old man.
So, just for transparency, that piece of land on Alaska, by the cement factory.
Yeah, this one, the county for the county.
County is, yeah, I have my eye on that. So, I know that developers were what? Oh, well, and this is where you help as a, affordable residential type area.
Deep in floodplain, so it needs a lot.
Yeah, it needs a lot of mitigation, but I have been talking to them about it, and they're, so this is a 5-year plan to remediate it and, pull it up, so.
I've got my own problem.
Oh, I know, that, yeah, we don't have
Here, I'm playing my life. The big area on this goal is to get the transit station in place so stuff's not there.
Well, boulders are a problem when you don't have.
Well, but look what they're doing around that station. Rolling up.
That's my point, yeah. So, that's my big idea, because I think economically, that will be good for us. Development on South Main.
I always look at it together, and there's a lot of people and sure everybody can't be just there's got to be some
And much A bigger
On the west campus. Teaching opportunities coming out. Today's technology can do so many
And I've never talked to I was preempted at the second floor, waiting on the street, people, and
So thematically, you have the river, you have assets, so many dollars, how we go through repairs. So you have to evaluate that.
Jeff Shoemaker, the guy that's
Catalyst, because we don't have enough surface, that open space. When you're in an urban setting, but you also have to acknowledge, on 287, east to west. 287, it's pretty urban. And so, you know, acknowledging your uses changing along the river, some supporting wildlife and regulation, because it isn't conducive to that. You have to begin to create something that's attractive to create a class. To come in along the line, playing and a long vision, do that because have that creative enough, or have art, have entertainment, have all feed together, and if you think having connections around you,
that's the way it grows.
and I think
That was my first question, what is our catalyst, and where do you want it to be? And I agree with all that, knowing that we are what, 2 miles, Longmont's about 2 miles.
And then,
It's a 6, but it feels like 8.
So my point is, how do we get people in here to inlet and then
So you have flows. What are your flows on the river? In this case, it's a river.
It varies. Typical runoff is in the range of 12 to 15.
So you get 12, 15 kind of which and
10.
Oh, it goes that way.
All the diversions are west of the city.
So that's a challenge. But what I would work,
The way we redesign, we're redesigning in a way that creates pool areas and constricts, even though it's a low flow, you don't have the feel that it's so one thing is, the thing that the city has massive one thought over the years was that it ties into Union Reservoir, as you come out of the Union, you can create an entire circulation. A lot of energy involved, so not sustainable, we're going to power with solar. And we're going to have to be careful on the ability to shuffle some water through. The state is still in control of who takes water out of the river. So one of the things we have accomplished with these corridors and the parks that we're going to open, we call it a floating course or kite course. The city has filed the water rights 10 or 15 years ago that blocked up all the water.
where would that be? Where would you have those? Yeah, that's where I'm going. Is you have this river corridor, right? And you want people to be attracted to it for what it is.
That's why I think that Longmont should have something there that brings people, whether it's a combined event center, academic village, a library, everything that brings different types of
The next thing we higher education right now, the University of Colorado Boulder has a $1.2 billion economic efficiency for 47,000 jobs.
Right, your business, yeah. It is very busy, and it does for economic development in that area.
So Brian, you're doing your project now.
And this could be a totally walkable.
What's the biggest thing that could happen that would make it even more wildly successful than what you're thinking? What would you envision changing?
You need street station.
Get the transit center.
When we first put together council records, we had our 12 buses for our project, we had 28.
Ready to assemble.
Right here. It sounded like.
Oh, this is predecessor. Anyway, when we were doing that back then, nobody was with her. We had a hard time connecting with her to envision the possibility of an urban type of transportation suburban. It was very hard to
Yeah, so you got, Haynes Community College does their capital, but Germany does the, Regis has their out, CSU has their extension, CSU has their. I envision.
I guess if I could take it a step, like who's going to track all this?
Different ideas to track there. So it's, physically, I don't know what that is, but I think scientifically.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also think it's universities love our commuters because there's no other things like that.
Because you have to create with the vibrancy.
Why are you going to 24 hours? Why are you attracting?
You have to come in, like, why should they leave? Why not? I mean, we're just
To that point, you don't have any hotels, so you got it.
or around
You have
here.
to, you have, so that would be the third, you give you some station, is part of the hospitality. And then you start to come in, stay for a day or two or more. One of the things that say that, that's a really good guys.
Would it be part of it? Looking for a county campus or whatever? That absolutely could happen. It's just, what a start, and you've got to not pin yourself in. Pin yourself into with that. Keep the DU options open. Well, Regis at one time was going to build here. We were having first serious discussions. So that didn't come about.
You'll find that you don't want to do it. Just because I think
Keep them out.
Keep them out. Yeah, exactly. 6 years ago, where I saw it, is this an opportunity to get profile of all the employees in CU and what percentage of that further huge percentage if I don't have the students to actually get information. But I meant the teachers. I don't want to go there. And it was, I saw the stat and I was like, wow. So
They could live and work.
well, but they could do both, right? They could do 2 days teaching here in Longmont, 3 days in Boulder. That's a pretty good deal, right? So maybe there's something there we should do that.
We haven't created asset like a route to track a class for the cost. Everybody likes cost.
San Antonio, look what's going on in San
And
Antonio.
they get that because they have these certain amenities that can also just down. And what they do is
And then expanding that,
quality hotel in the old town, just
That's a good point.
how many decades is that after all the things that are
yeah, I mean, it offers things that other ones
Right, exactly. Nobody wanted to get there. That's why I moved there, because I like that.
How did the city?
With that
assist?
hotel, yeah, there are incentives there, sure. Yeah, well, it was a partnership with the Everett family. The Everett's had bought it.
Hospital, and the city basically came to us and said, look, we've got to have a hotel here just to get something going around the hospital. They came in, they basically waived all the fees, they gave us lodging tax back for 10 years. They made it happen. Hampton would have never done a hotel. It's starting to get some success. To get hospitality downtown, I mean, we've talked to several people on our Peace Next to Cheese headquarters about they want to do a boutique hotel here, and everybody loved it. The numbers said what area 5 years out. Right? So it's original for the next 5 to 7 years.
Basically beating off boulders.
Across from you guys.
But I think the challenge there is my observation is that they're at a point in their lives, and I don't know that there's another generation coming up.
He's the family broker.
What would you think, Ron?
It's another great stuff. I mean, our site next to your cheese here, we got it on transit center.
New transit.
Everybody's talking budget.
So one thing I that would be another redevelopment. It's a big parcel city.
We start to do it.
Which one? Budget center. Right here in Boston.
They're,
Southland.
you know, firing on lines of land for the transit center.
And so, for example.
Yeah, I mean, that's my goal would be, yeah, to have that too.
No, that's what I said. The way it is right now, what I'm saying, actually, you've got kind of two ends.
There's enough demand, enough support. Because to build, look how long it's taken to get this set up. And that's heavily subsidized by DNA or Gaylord County here. Heavily subsidized. So one thing, you have to get something, because you have an event center, you gotta prove to these things and founders that there's demand. So then, yeah, I can see a quality hotel. There's no quality flags. It's amazing. Not bad. They just have sort of yeah, standards. Yeah. I mean, the whole model. Yeah, they're huge.
And they had all different.
Yes, and I know it's different, but I'm just saying, yes, it's going to help to be able to become a destination.
Well,
Smart city of Michigan.
so that's why I figured, what is it that will get money?
So the other side, $1 billion
For everybody. We're trying to solve that, but we really are running out of space. But just having people here, they don't have any place to spend their money.
The important thing now is where this generation is going to spend money. It's going to be entertainment. It's not going to be baby. We spend money. It's not going to be that. It isn't. I know this.
They don't want
things. Yeah, it's
And
usually
that's
travel.
that's why I.
Travel, food,
Very
music.
unique experience. If you could do an IMAX.
build out these multi-million-dollar
Things that
projects.
are different.
I know somebody who has
Facilitate entrepreneurial
has an empty sports authority.
economic.
But I mean, our project's gonna be an
Doing
interesting
it in a
experiment.
way that
We all think
smart city
It's
technology.
gonna be interesting. It's 300, 400 people living in two,
And that's why I
in
want-
one city block. It's gonna be really interesting to see what type of people live in the South.
And that's why I'm excited about your thinking that we need to expand that area
The immediate surrounds of the housing.
really special.
Retail and non-bonding.
Well, there's a unique opportunity right now, because right now there are large tracts of land that are available.
Exactly.
And will be available for
Laboratory.
Where you walk out of your apartment and walk down Main Street, where people are library, not up where it's like 7 out of car, no offense. And on Sunday morning, you get up and say, hey, before church, let's have a farmer's market. Because the farmer's market down the biggest, that's be a Bible study. Well, you can walk out to Main Street, go south, to the big box center, and 3 grocery stores within 5 blocks. This South Main area is the spot. It's just figuring out what,
It is, they're not gonna have cars.
you know, and I don't see Keaton here. He owns a big chunk. I don't see, I don't see, I don't see the RMCS guys here. They don't like any of this area. What's that? No, Pablo's a little piece, yeah, right on it.
Well, it's not really developed, but it's
But you got guys that own big tracts of land.
But we can take their vision to them and say, this is what Cassie wants to see. Are you in it to make it happen? And that's the whole.
You know, I just retired from my day-time job. That's my and most old projects was help and spend an awful lot of time.
Yeah.
And so I've seen thousands of taxis, I've seen thousands of taxis. And what happens is, I got to the point where I could tell, and this is against private, this is a warning signal from private. A ton of developers walking into the market, but that's the market. Build this, build this, build that. I agree. These people have those connections and now what happens is, at the end of the day, 90% of them fall because you also need that first domino who's got the capital. You need that guy who's going to say, I'm putting down the marker, I'm building that. Go out. That's $50 million.
Well, and I agree, but for me, I think we're going at it from all directions. And this meeting for me is, if developers don't see a vision, if they don't know what you want or where you're going, it's hard for them to get invested. So this is just one, well, just one way.
I think developers, this is all creating tools. They'll come in, if there's no vision here, they'll come in and create it as long as they can make money. Yeah, and so, before it comes to market, it starts up there with different stuff, and then it takes time sometimes for everything to come together. And then the city really planned the north side for it. Those ideas are right around the lake, so louder, it's mostly east land. I don't do anything that's not market. You gotta prove it. I need success.
You have to prove my success is hard at the You don't want speculation.
Right, and I think this is, for me, that's what this is creating a demand.
So the zoning is pretty much in place in this area, in this first and main area.
Wow.
Yeah. It should not be a barrier. It's pretty flexible. You can go 4 stories. Huge district thing I'm hearing that might be coming. I think that will be helpful.
I think we've got the, from a municipal perspective, you've got the utility.
Utilities, infrastructure's there, the enterprise zone's there, the opportunity zone is there. I mean, all
those pieces,
The elements are
to
there.
your point, most cities don't have half this stuff.
Or the
But
hamper.
what I mean about the city having a vision, sure, these people have land, but do we want to see more storage units because that helps them with gas stations?
But your zoning doesn't allow for that. So right now, MU zoning, you can't do storage, you can't do convenience and gas. So that's what I'm saying, that piece is,
We've done that.
for this particular area, I think that piece is there. And I go back to where I own land, but there's more of it in my world.
I think that we're gonna feel more and more pain as not having any sort of confidence in this community. That's the first time, guys, in 35 years.
That's west,
Where the owners never reinvested. So it became dated, and once it becomes dated, you're not going to attract any sort of business connection.
coming out, which
You have to be willing to invest and reinvest. And I think what was missing, part of what I was
I really don't care.
performing arts center.
What I'm asking here is, what everybody's talking about, the elephant in the room, the cultural aspect.
So you go to downtown Denver, you don't just go to the convention center.
You discuss taking
You head over to the Veterans Center, you head over to all the activities.
You discuss
The
different
food plated with beans.
It's a nice
Food.
So the idea of the Julian is kind of where people go for that.
I think my question is, if they really demand, are they going to,
Are they going to absorb?
it's just a question, if this is something you can do, should be in Longmont, let's face it, much
There's really no,
24/7 performing arts, you got the university,
oh, you got Chicago.
yeah, and you got
There's concerts there.
and then the dairy, you go, oh yeah, all the dairy. But I'm just asking the market, right? And everybody's talking about, like, it has to demand.
Well, not just our county, but wellness.
So what does the market tell you?
By you, so when you said how do we make it in the world?
Because I was, when they did that, sports center, kind of in the middle of nowhere back then. You crossroads had evolved, but they had a hot cold team. They had, but it's probably interesting to look at. That'd be a good guy for our clear. You guys are bring some development, but it was part of the Northern Colorado Economic Development. I want to go to part of that, getting that convention. Yeah, Jay Harvey.
And they also bring together family paragraphs, you know. With all the elements that they really look at. So, the plans for that.
Well, we brought that up.
I love different paragraphs. What? Do we want to
Convention, no, combine the
convention.
Yeah, be approved. You've got all the hospitality that you offer.
So the Baldwin County, the Baldwin County Fairgrounds is under the Baldwin County Parks and Rec.
What do you want to do? Variable.
They had a new guy there, and I asked him, because I'm interested in the questions. And they need to do a nationwide survey, last year they did that by
Get off the train, get off the bus.
and they said they survey this year, because they haven't asked them, we're gonna have several questions on that national survey. The garden party,
So let's go back to why.
Some of us remember way better.
Let's go.
So West Georgia, and it was out there, and it was falling apart. So now, the city and the county, what's the, back in the late 70s.
That idea.
We're not out of time. You do not have to say the last thing you meant to say as fast as you can say it. We're not out of time.
It's time
This is a check-in.
because that land
This
is
is
so
a check-in.
valuable right now.
I would love to know what is the best
idea you heard so far? Let me hear 3 or 4 of them. What's the coolest thing you've heard so far? That would really propel Longmont as that center of all those great things. No one's willing to share.
We had one with the collaborative performing arts, Front Range Community College campus with some integrated housing, all as one project being built as an opportunity zone perspective somewhere around Martin and Main and Martin.
Cool. What else did you hear that was cool?
Yes, ma'am.
John Dixon.
I know. It's more, instead of a facilities problem, which is all of these things are true. Build a university, build housing, build all these things. It's more of a cultural question, which is how do you break this into pieces and identify, for example, if you go to any of the great cities, how do they define the areas? You say, well, let's go to that district. Let's go to this district. And you know them all by name. Let's go to the left bank. Let's go to the Shibuya district, or so on. And so what if, for example, you chose the First and Main intersection in the transportation district and you had somebody that said something like, what do you want to do? Well, I don't know. Let's go downriver. What do you want to do? I feel like going up Main. Let's go upriver tonight. Does that define anything in your mind that says, what kind of a district and culture would I see if I went in these different directions? Because if it's all one, this you described a giant area. You can't have one culture across the entire area, and you won't. Right? And then that's where, for example, entrepreneurship expresses itself culturally. And says, this is what I want to do in this area because it feels good to do that. That's that area I want to bring my business to, or my shop to, or an institute instead of a higher education. One of them bring an institute that says you can all meet here because you know what? You don't. You don't have a place where you all get together. We're already in the centroid of that. So basically it's some sort of a meeting ground idea. But this idea of culturally defining what you're doing before you decide what you want to go put somewhere. Yes, the Performing Arts Center defines a culture. Okay, what about the rest of it?
Yeah, very cool. What you guys? Big ideas over here? No, Ellen? Here we go.
Well, similar to what we just heard.
Similar
I mean, we're
conversations.
trying to get our heads around this convention, cultural, educational center, and Alan asked an interesting question: why doesn't it exist today in Boulder County, anywhere around here? And is there a market for it? Is the question. And it's a great idea, and we all think it's wonderful, and we want it, but it's got to make sense. It's got to pencil.
Do like the record show, we did come up with an academic village that's a little bigger than their table.
Yeah.
Like, it's a little bigger,
Bigger,
a little
bigger,
bigger,
better.
broader.
Yeah, a little bigger and better.
And that fairgrounds, huge untapped opportunity.
Yeah. Very good. How about over here?
Sandy, I wanted to say something, that everybody's ideas are, I think they all center off of technology at some level. One of the things we're talking a lot about in our school system is, through that whole Gordon Moore's law from Intel, that the power and the speed of microchips, information is doubling every 24 months. And so what used to take 20 years to evolve now will take 20 months to evolve. And so whether it is, a convention center, an education hub, or facilities, I think our next slide is something that sets us apart and gives us a real edge. But I think we have to really pay attention to the presence of technology in this community, whether we have the Apples or the Googles or the aerospace industry or the cybersecurity industry, all these things that can lead to, not that we don't need facilities, we do, but facilities in some sense are going to be not obsolete, but they're certainly not going to have the place in society that they're going to have 20 years from now because of technology and virtual connections and all of those kinds of things. In the short term, I do think that Longmont, could benefit significantly from a huge convention center with hotel and opportunities to bring people together. And I also think that, to continue to attract young families, a mega pool and ice arena that would allow for people to not have to go to Loveland or down to Boulder to have those summer recreational and competitive swimming and those kinds of things. But I would really pay attention to that whole technology push. We were talking about it from the perspective of education, you know, I don't see 20 years from now, people paying large tuitions to drive into a parking lot, walk into a facility and hear a lecture from a professor. I see people gathering from India and China and the United States and all over the world virtually, where they're sitting in a room virtually just like this, having a conversation at 1/3 the cost. And a lot of the stimulation, and it doesn't mean that we're all going to become isolated. I know that that's what someone might automatically go to, the worst fear in their own mind. But this is coming whether we want it to or not. And so I just think we ought to pay attention. When Google says we're going to Boulder, Apple says they're going to Boulder, aerospace is all and other locating in other communities, that's a problem for us.
We talked about what you need for the facilities to be able to have green here as well. Oh, there?
I was just saying, Ruby, come on in.
Come on in, Ruby. What you guys?
Technology may take education away from the habits, make people away from workplaces, they work from home. I think the thing I heard there was there still needs to be a place to be. You get that human connection. If that's the cultural center, it's being a part for work school or every place else will really drive people to want a place to be.
Yeah, I think that's true. Gathering places would be more important. Natural spaces would be more important.
I just want to say, let's not assume that it is inevitable that we have to be bolder. So.
Fair enough. Bolder than bolder.
So, kind of to piggyback on those two comments, sorry, somebody else. What we're really talking about is quality of life and well-being for our community. And something we very much have undervalued as a society is the value of nature in our lives. And we're just starting to unpack the inherent intelligence of that and the value of that. Things like lower mental health, less depression, 15-minute walk raises your T cell count that holds for 30 days. I mean, we all know that. We get in nature, we go, so, you know, in that spirit, it reduces symptoms of ADHD, it lowers blood pressure, increases memory, increases cognition, elevates stress, reduces depression. So I just want to throw that out there. You know, whole nature in terms of the well-being picture, the value of that. It's hard to measure as we talk about economic development.
In support of that, oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, here's a.
So to, piggyback on that, that was kind of one of the big things that we talked about too, was making sure that we, protect the nature corridor and make sure it's a nice cohesive thing that is augmented and attached to, whatever ends up getting developed and built. Because that Mayor Bagley had an awesome, point that if he really wants to see, continuous open space, like all the way out from the grasslands up to the park, having that go right through Longmont. And we've got that already with the, St. Right corridor right there, but protecting it is.
But it needs to be accessible.
Yeah.
Right, to the community.
Marshall, last comment, and then we're going to get back into your conversations.
We wanted to say, a lot of people would say, well, why are you talking about locating certain things, especially major public buildings, major public features on the East Reach? And the reason is because that's the wide place, and because those public buildings would then be built overlooking Dickens Farm Park. Does everybody know where Dixon Farm Park is going to be? Sandra, if everybody knows. So the natural being then enhances the most important amenities that the city can offer.
But just having pockets of nature isn't really, we need to have, our St. Vrain is a wildlife movement corridor. People may not know that we have bobcats out of Sandstone Ranch that came right down through the foothills to that. So wildlife moves at night. So when we talk about doing it all, I would propose do it like other trails and open spaces. People have access from sunrise to sunset, and then it's kind of hands off, sunset to sunrise. So just to start, throw that out there.
So
Okay, are you at the top of what's possible? Are you talking about the highest, best possible uses for this area? Are you thinking high enough? Are you thinking big enough? Are you thinking in a way that will transform this community? If you're saying yes, then that's good. If you're saying no, it's time to continue the conversation. I'd like to invite you to continue the conversation. At this point, remember your stickies. So if you're having these ideas, these different ideas that you'd like to make sure that we consider in the next step of this, the big stickies are for general ideas. The little stickies are for an idea that actually has a place that we'll put up on the map. So I want you to continue your conversations. I invite you to continue your conversations. And we'll check in again in 30 more minutes. Big sticky. No, it's not a public meeting. So it's not the same kind of thing.
It's always evolving.
Let me show you where we put everything. It is fun, good idea. I like your idea. I even wrote an email saying where is it? Yes, so I saw I just replied to your email about the everything. So I'm sorry we're getting
Part of the repair station, so it has a spur. Yes. And all that stuff. And they converted this thing into massive food hall, other shops, and all that stuff. But it was incredible. I mean, I've been away.
So there's lots of different kinds of meetings, right? There's advisory meetings, there's actual regular meetings. Regular meetings are those that the council is going to participate in some decision making, like the retreat, like the work sessions, those kinds of meetings. Those things are posted differently than invited advisory meetings. The advisory meetings are closed to the public, and you notice that, but it's not the same kind of thing because it wasn't an on-call, it was an invitation. Yeah, but you know what? You have more than that's true. Yep. And that should have been more widely publicized. But it wasn't, there's no invitation to. No, but the public needs to know. Absolutely. Let me show you. Hopefully it's in there.
Because we don't want to build a 25-year building.
Exactly. People are, there's a lot of meetings that are like this, is what I'm telling you, that people are invited to in these conversations, and I want to show you where we notice them all.
Exactly. That was cool 100 years ago. Right. So if you can build timeless real estate on that timeless river, that's flexible.
At the beginning of each of these meetings, I guess that was my point when I was saying, you know, that's, I know that people are going to look there. I just want to make sure that the developers have plans don't create just over exactly. You know, you need to have a picture in front of these that show that. That's what I mean.
It's like, you know, yes, sure, let's do this.
For developers to actually I have a really good point. It used to be at the beginning of every agenda, you can see what's happening in the upcoming months of the council. You know what I mean? And it's posted in the designated posting places. Of course, that's, you know, there's.
People don't want to do things, they got other projects.
Demand doesn't arrive.
Oh, there's more than 4 council members here. I think there's 26. Yeah, so it's not even posted, and it's in violation of the sunshine law. It's not in violation of the sunshine law, because it's posted in the designated posting space, which is that space next to the council agenda where we post it down the council chamber, next, across from the council chamber. Yeah, but hers should be out here on the website. You're absolutely right on that, and I thought we used to have it. And I'm not seeing it. I don't know if that's just because we just moved over to 2019 or what happened. I wonder what that is.
We wouldn't be sitting here today.
No one's gonna look there. I didn't look there, and I'm familiar with council stuff.
But down there, the city has to.
I understand your point. This is what the council calendar looks like. And this has everything that they're invited to. There's a lot of meetings outside of their regular designated people meetings that they're invited to, and we try to post as many of those as possible.
They should have been right on the front page.
But there's no, it's not a public meeting.
Yeah, but it should be
It's
announced.
open to the public, but it's not a public meeting.
So if it's open to the public, then it should say, well, public invited to attend, but no participation. But it needs to be on the front page. And you have the council material.
That's true.
A lot, so I think it's a violation.
I do think it probably, I would disagree, because we're going to talk to you about it. But what I would say is that we could do a much better job of publicizing the council in general. I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
I shouldn't have to call Maria Tostada to get the information for this meeting.
You don't want to join the table?
I told that it had to be a community event, a public forum.
Even right now, you could
It's an invited meeting. You're welcome to talk to Councilmember Waters. It's not my meeting. Councilmember Waters.
It's interesting how level.
But I think you're right. We should do a much better job of publicizing the council calendar.
For sure.
And I even went on the search page, the search part. Oh, okay.
Okay, so I'm here.
I
You search for that meeting.
There's
There's nothing to say.
Yeah, I just watched all those posts and the council ideas on.
You know what, we could absolutely put that on. Yeah, this is stuff
And then
that
that gives the vision.
That's
That sets the
exactly.
vision.
Yeah, why would we bring it to that?
And people can think,
No,
oh,
I have
what are we
that.
part of that?
And I look, I work out like people saying things.
I appreciated your presentation yesterday. Yeah, I learned a lot more about it.
Let me get Maria.
No,
It's right, it's pretty varied.
no, I thought it was very good.
You're right.
I walked away with some key
What do you
points.
feel about
Learning experience.
Sounds like the mayor's inviting you to his table.
Yeah.
Sounds like the mayor's inviting you to his table.
The problem is I haven't figured out the money aspect yet.
That's all right. Neither have I. Slowly but surely.
So are we supposed to put notes up on the board?
No, not necessarily, just kind of continue the conversation for 30 minutes and then.
Then we'll put them on the board. Okay, I was just curious, I'm trying to give guidance over here. 'Cause
Yeah, nope.
they're often philosophical.
Great.
I'm trying to get them more specific.
Yeah, good. It's okay to be philosophical too.
Yeah, to a degree.
Yeah, true.
I like the, coming forward. Whatever.
Oh.
That turns on light bulbs.
I shouldn't identify myself as somebody who watches South Park. Have you ever watched? A lot of us Soto Sofa, which is South Downtown South Park, where they're kind of making fun of the name of Denver. But you're right,
You don't want me naming it.
You're talking about the brand of the stuff that you're selling. I always sat there and said, the amazing thing. I'm not trying to be, it's nice being
can be close to Boulder, but not really Boulder. We have such an advantage from the electric system. That's the thing. They're not the same. So you use the bicycle and use Longmont is a better place to access for the all the banks in the park town. But the access to the canyon, Carter Lake. We have so many natural assets.
Well, we could be
The question is, you gotta get these generals to drop it into the campus. They're only gonna do that with a big incentive package. So how do you do that? You can do that with power, and that's the problem, right? Those processes, what's not power is a very low cost, but putting it just so I don't know what we're stopping this, but how do you get something or something like that to come in? One of them come in. That gives you technology.
Probably the biggest next to Boulder. This is people that have these things that sort of be investing in. Boulder hasn't kind of had a crazy. And to be honest, you paid attention to the whole for that. We now have this looking at all the sites, all the random parcels in one park. He's already working on that. Converting the land next to Fire Road and everything else. Just because he hears a voice in his house, it's a better, this is a better use of his time than all this. There's an opportunity.
talking about opportunities though, Dad was talking about having virtual schools and stuff. That does not address the hands-on training.
Vocational
Learning, vocational, and I think that is one of the things
I think we can differentiate ourselves that way.
Yeah.
And mentorship,
Yes.
reading about mentorship and if we can find somebody who's somebody who's into that whole future, let's prepare a non-career person for it's true. Somebody is like I have dreams and I have a way.
Vocational school. He's looking for it right now.
That's the other issue. When you study, what happens is developers like Florida and California, the state development. On the river, politicians would say that have centers. Florida's and $6,000 and $7,000. And the slide towers started getting taller. And Oregon facilities kept on getting bigger. And he was one that said, the next competition is education. Right. Because every year it takes a kid smart enough to college.
And they're not. It isn't about smart either. It's about your own child, a vision for their life, where they want to go. And you need the options.
I mean, he was doing it, but they raised the rates. It was like, I can't afford it now. The last
Junior college, that's in downtown. It's an amazing thing. It's an exception. I just want to step up. I know it's lovely parking. It's actually $30. My kid has to go to college. And you can buy and you can't find people that want to
I agree, and you can even, as far as the trade school, have a instruction, how to hang drywall, how to, because we have a lot of people just developers, I don't.
But we should be incentivized. So filling in the site, it's already happening at the federal level. Facilitating all kinds of school grants and funding. Again, we're talking about a lot of that out there.
I'm a big believer that facilitates on the same branch. You know what I mean? How do
Along the river, there's north and south.
you know, it's where it could be a college.
Longmont was the number one place for all the patents, trademarks that were filed. Even if it's just, and you have data points like that, if you were to put that all together, the fact that all this academia from fees, you might ask the trademarks instead of rail. Like you have to put something in policy, wants to be location, that's what you got. Just about the food, natural food, beverage, it's all here. Someone just got branded, put it together.
There is a thing that
So that might be something that we use to
food hall.
by May or whatever, they have actually.
Everybody wants to do science and technology. Is there another, is there a version of that? It's not as high tech, it's down the road tech to solve that, middle, right, to get down.
Okay, good. I think that's development.
It's really big.
Because those
Yeah, that's it, and it's hard.
they're never gonna go away. We're always, we don't know where technology is going. You know, 20 years, it's a totally different thing. We build our cities. We don't anything. We've got.
Example of that, 20 years ago. 30 years ago, oil and gas companies, booms and busted with oil and gas sites.
No, exactly, we don't wanna do that.
Now that's gone in Denver because it's got healthcare, technology, oil and gas, it diversified itself, and that's what you want to see. In a smaller level. So that blueprint's already there, it's happened in Colorado, and we've got oil and gas. Top executives from extraction, when you like where this wasn't. So you have these industries that are here, you train people to go on.
So I'm gonna bring up one idea I heard, I would caution, which is if you have a riparian area, what you should create, this is say, create 24/7. And then the people have to be able to experience it, in the summer, people are out.
Yeah, but that's.
Wildlife super important. I'm a fisherman, I believe in wildlife. It's prioritizing wildlife in an urban setting over human activity. Or they can stifle, I think, a lot of the potential, because you know, we want to create a district here and however they help build the infrastructure. Yeah. I just heard the idea, shut it down at night.
Coming together as nodes, so it's good, because between nodes, you can go next.
Yes.
Then you got a node, then you go next.
I just reality is
Yeah, lighting.
the matter plan that we public but we're taking a river that corridor for 150 flags. Now it's 3 So, yes, and how you protect lighting is one of the biggest issues. You can light this corridor up at night. You can have low lighting, you get the major area that you want it to have. You don't want that to be a major area where you have animatronics, deer or something. You want it real. And people look at that and go, they'll understand. But I tend to agree now and just say,
River corridor allows you to have transition
relying on natural resources that have the education background, biological, ecological perspective.
That'll be part of
Well, I think going to work with nobody's knowing their own chart and when they get there. And I'm part of the demonstrating your one of the things that please don't do is when I walk, I conversation going, and there are weeds that are trying to and Golden has done some of the same things that they felt right up against it.
Hardscape right to the edge.
Right to the edge where you have, and go to San Antonio with paper plates, sunglasses, everything. It's a problem, and they have to drain it twice a year in order to clean it. It's Bill Milton,
Study Austin. Austin's
maybe I'll go there.
What's the river to Austin?
Colorado, but it's really late. It's just a series. It's fed by Colorado.
It's pretty impressive. But Austin's Boston. But it's starting to all I'm saying is, you know, from experience with there's one stream that is anything except wildlife. Well, there's a fluidity that's got a herd out there. There's some sustainability.
And I think the cities that, I think places like Portland, where you've got awesome residential areas, different pockets of areas, where they're all in and most of them public spaces and into their transit system, frankly, that works. But you can walk, and you're not relying on cars and your bike, you can walk, and you're going to beautiful areas. So you're not coming through, something that's hardscape. Or think about it. We go and see in the park. That's the fun.
So the big idea is
this awesome vibrant city.
And so what that does is if you create that here, it creates a corridor. Streets can hit. You know, it's on a smaller scale. That's not.
You're going to go in your car.
I want to go back to the city a little bit. I looked at places like we're down by South Alaska, see that as
Not much vision.
No, and yeah. 90% is blind. Why are we not saying that? You can maximize your profit. And yeah, if
Don't pay your parking lot. Use your
yeah. Especially.
You gotta have parking, so where you put the parking?
Yeah, you structure it or and that.
So you gotta get to the price point.
And that's where the
Where that can work.
That's where you have to work.
So
Especially Longmont, that is walking to the mall, that's walking to all the stores. Why are we blocking and that's what we should approach developers. Farm out. What can we do to help with that? I think it's a partnership. But we don't just say, yeah, I
legislature remedies the
well, that's true.
You're not supposed to come calling me to do something else.
That's my point.
Yeah.
That's my general ideas. Oh, sorry, Marcia, they go on to sorry. We have a lot more room, I'm sorry. I thought big ideas were that you know. Oh, no, I think we're gonna have a lot of them. Yeah, yes. And then after
You want us to go fair.
put it up on the map and verify.
Yeah, maybe get that point.
General comment.
Get
General
enough.
ideas.
So really, you
Get your ideas now.
Branding,
Or a big idea thing.
So it has to be, this is the nature area, and here's your,
the other thing is,
you know, it's a long high tech versus what I call maker space or vocational.
I would call it,
which is
vocational brain implementation. Nobody wants to go there.
The trade.
Trade
schools, trade veterans.
those individuals that have the capacity to have more wealth as they grow.
The interesting thing is if you try to figure out how to come up with a centralized trade area. You find out you have a lot of farmers that come here and stuff, and you know, try to educate the trades, you know, that sort of thing.
Well, there's a lot of learning journey happening.
Well, nobody's getting into those, but young people.
And we have to help make that happen.
You gotta create those
You know, we should have a band. The union was very interested in that. We have no money. So, it takes, developers have money coming in from other things to develop that, to build that. And we have the
that route.
Especially the first 2 years of school.
That's the thing about the dollar, right? Every parent's hoping they do that. Come on, Johnny, you can do it. So, yeah.
Did we put vocational school up there? Preschool.
That's part of it.
Oh, that's
Just let people have the dialogue. It's helpful just to know, and I like to get informed. And here's the big idea about it's a big idea. So ask me hard questions.
Wildlife is not where our malaria is.
They're environment ways to their health. Just for them, all rebuilding along.
Longmont is
Bites on the old restaurant.
You don't do commercial.
Cool building. Big
I had three black boxes. Consumer. And we understand from the outside. Yeah.
That might be
When you guys decide on something, that
I've heard that
and fun? We are. We are. We have another thing.
Unfortunately, I haven't helped now because I did all kinds. Every time I talk to you, good.
Did you want to put these in any kind of, or just random?
It's fine. You have to use plus. It's not,
Do
it's
that. I
not
mean, that's
simple on fire.
Right.
Most of our fires are not. But, I mean, it's gonna be hard to attract super quality dining. You'll probably have to do something.
That would be the spot.
It's very hard to. I agree.
Yeah.
I wanted it forever. This is really 5,000. I would have died to put it, you know, Lone Star.
Well, you know, when we had that
That's that quality.
design
My book, but it's not my book, which I did, you know, it's trying to and the market, match the market. That's the top of and you got Ted's clothes, Ted's clothes.
So wherever you are, you can get to the easily without traffic.
Wherever you are. But this is the heart that all the artists protected.
That's what I meant.
Like that place in
Build something.
That's what I was
One time buying Mike Scott's fire. Christine, I've heard your name bandied about. One of the ideas referred to as a golden
I like one for apex at the time.
I own this property. Directly across from Rogers Road. Owned it a long time. Worked horse property down the dirt lane.
Yeah, got
And Ventures own property up here in the north, buildings over here, doing big development. So one of the big ideas is building out here with higher density. And looking at this area,
Both destination for all schools where the connection between nature and learning. Just what you This is no, which is it's not just this.
Primary water sewer lines, primary protect water line runs through this area right here. Sewer lines right down the high view.
I know you're like,
Probably should always 30 acres right here. Oh, okay. So a lot of what we're seeing today is by work I've been doing. The real part of it, Longmont, a lot of talk about going east of the and so like
if the city's willing, reach out to organizations, relationships, kind of world-class designers. I'm happy to look for it. I know.
Yeah. I'm happy to say something about but I think it was meaningful to see who's got one piece here. And that outreach on the other side.
And then I may come in.
Okay, once you got all your stickies up. That's good. Wow. I know, right? All right, go ahead and have a seat. Wrap it up. Now that all your big ideas are out here. Okay, you're welcome to keep writing while we kind of wrap things up and continue to move forward. I want to talk a little bit about the next steps, but I also want to hear, well, first of all, we go through the next steps, and then I want to hear some of the big ideas that ended your conversations. What was your favorite thing that you heard or you thought of or you'd like to make sure as part of the consideration during the river process? So we're going to categorize these ideas that y'all had, although a lot of them are integrative. That's absolutely awesome. Things around connection and things around access and jobs and becoming a hub and all these different great ideas that are up there. So we're going to categorize those and see if we can kind of get some semblance of what happened. We'll send all that back out to you on both maps. Next meeting, meeting 2, I think we're envisioning is mid-February, depending on how things are scheduled. We're hoping to take the ideas that you had today, turn that into some level of visual representation for you to be able to take a look at. Because obviously, it's one thing to write down, we'd like to see this and this. And then sometimes it looks different when you see it on a picture or on a map or in a design. So what we'd like to do is put that together for your consideration next time. In the next meeting, we also want for you all to get together in similar tables and talk a little about the narrative for different aspects of the river project. Meeting 3, after we do a community involvement process where we take the information from you all and allow the community then to start to have their voice and their conversation about what you all are kind of laying out for Longmont. Then meeting 3, we'll do some action planning. The question on the table will be, what's it going to take from Longmont to realize this? What does the council need to do to open the gates? And what would it take for you to commit to make this happen? Again, I said we're going to have a parallel development process. We'll be doing a digital engagement process as well as in-person interviews during Cinco de Mayo and Rhythm on the River, as well as other engagement processes. So we'll continue that. That's kind of the in-between. But what I'm interested to hear from you all is what things came to mind that you thought, man, I could do this, or we could do that. What was like the biggest, best ideas that in your mind came out of your tables?
Is that what we're supposed to say now?
Yeah, that's what we're supposed to say now.
Start with Peter.
I'm going to start with Harold.
The most interesting is like.
I'm probably extra because I want to talk about conversation.
Louder. Tell me about your
Piece I want to
conversation.
talk about, Don and I had a different conversation that a lot of really big ideas, collaboration was the constant theme through this. But one of the things they actually did in the construction of the Innovation Center is they partnered with IDO. And so I wanted Don to talk a little bit about that and the opportunity for us as a community to utilize their relationship with IDO and see if this is something the group is interested in bringing to bear. I mean, generally, they're probably world leader in design and thinking and process. And so, Don, you want to talk a little bit about it? If that's something we want to see, he and I can start having conversations. So what does that look like?
What is ideal?
That's what I'm going to ask Don to talk a
Explain
little
what that
bit.
is. Okay.
You know, we traveled out to California, connected to the Stanford School of Design and a lot of innovation planning, future thinking. So when we were building the Innovation Center, we worked with them from an education perspective to see what facilities, whether it's the Innovation Center or any one of our other 60 schools, what do these facilities need to facilitate learning in underwater robotics, to facilitate learning in cybersecurity, facilitate learning in aeronautics and aerospace, and coding, and all of these things, and manufacturing, and everything that we know is where we're headed. And so they're able to help us create a facility that's conducive to that.
You know, within the facilities, we have capacity to stream across the world. So from our schools, we can are connecting with, you know, different places in China, different places in India, different places, you know, European nations, everywhere across the globe, and working on, you know, solutions, for example, with IBM for a smarter planet, things like that, and infusing design thinking into our system across the board, whether it's math or science or world languages, you name it. But they really do help you think about your facilities in a way that prepares you to prepare children for the future. So if you shift that concept over to what we're doing here, it may be able to help think about ways to create a community that prepares us for that next step. And they'll build off of your ideas. So in other words, they won't come in and tell you what to do. They'll be part of a conversation similar to this. They'll take your major themes, then they take them back and break them down, you know, condense them into some real thoughtful ideas, and then next steps, and then strategies. And it doesn't have to be IDEO. It doesn't, I mean, it could be, because we've had great success with them, and this is what they do worldwide. But it could be another outside facilitator that helps us, you know, condense our thoughts. If that's of an interest to anybody. Not that this group is not doing that really well, it's just narrow, so that I don't appear to be criticizing. But you guys are, he's the one that brought it up.
Well, we gotta take the next step. The next step, yeah.
And the reason is, when we look at the mission to be a center for science, technology, engineering, and, you know, a focus in the western part, that is a company that's known worldwide. They have done work with Apple. I mean, most of the major companies in innovation, they have been involved in it. And so if that's really our vision, having a connection to that type of corporation that works with all of these groups in some form or fashion, I think does further that vision to really become the center that is at the root of what the council has set for a goal. That was part of my thinking in this, because they can potentially bring other people to the table that we're not even thinking about. Something for the group to think about. But
yeah, the last thing I'll say about that is they do have a very close working connection to what's happening in California on one end of our country, in New York on another end of our country, and every state in between. And then beyond our own borders, they're very closely connected to what's going on in Asia and Europe. So they can give you this worldwide perspective and what needs to happen to prepare your education system for that next step. And then, what happens?
I was just going to say, so just starting the IDEO design certification training, and one of the things that's critical to me about the whole concept of design thinking is that it's human-centered design thinking. So it very much takes into consideration the human experience. So a lot of times we have a lot of really big ideas that sound cool, you know, our convention center and performing arts complex. But what about that and the human experience of interacting with that facility, and how do we create that human experience beyond just a facility?
That's great. So I would invite all of you, if you have other resources that you'd like to bring to bear as part of this conversation, to either touch base with Harold or with Councilmember Waters or myself as we do exit. I still want to hear a couple other ideas that came through the process. But if there's something that you're doing or thinking that, hey, my ex could help this process, then definitely let us know on your way out. Absolutely. What other ideas? What are the ideas that you heard that you just thought were transformational for Longmont?
Our group discussed, once the river area is defined more clearly, that we break it up into sections or districts, and that we focus the districts on a particular subject like arts or entertainment or whatever, and that you build a system approach around that. Who you gonna try to attract to that? What do you need to attract people to that? Housing, transportation, things of that sort. But don't try to do the whole district or the whole river area as one, but do it in chunks so it's a much more manageable process.
So that they have their own identities and
Yes.
cultures. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's you guys.
Yeah, we talked a lot about the branding of that comment. So, you know, everybody's probably heard of Rhino, but could you tell me what it stands for and what it means? That there's a brand there that is intriguing to people and they want to go investigate it. And so we talked about that. As you know, really creating a brand of something that doesn't necessarily exist today, but will exist.
Yeah.
So related to that, and what Dixon said earlier, is rather than using acronyms or names of districts like enterprise zone or opportunity zone, use words like a river district, arts district, innovation district, maker district, eco district. An acronym that I just threw out there came up with Rainmaker Eco District for river, arts, innovation, new urbanism, makers. Eco district balances ecology with the economy. And we could be the first Rainmaker Eco District in the country.
So that kind of sounds like something I saw Kimberly put up on the board. You want to talk about your connection to destination for schools?
Oh, yeah, I think as you look at this, you're right, there is long, it's going to have a bunch of different themes. But how are we going to tie those all together in a meaningful fashion that you can get from one to the other? And so looking at a trail, kind of a destination nature trail that takes all of the technology and learning opportunities, one that becomes a hub where you can see how urban environments and nature can cohabitate together, where all schools from all over would come as a learning opportunity, because you're really seeing how these mesh, how nature and urban can live together, and using the top technologies to do that.
Yeah. Look, you guys back here. What ideas did you have that were just amazing?
Most of them have already been addressed. I think we've talked about, I mentioned kind of having the Rhino of Longmont, but how do we address some of the issues that have arisen with the development of the River North District in Denver relative to, so one of my concerns is a lot of the conversation about development along the river is, you know, there are all of these structures that will come out of the floodplain, ripe for redevelopment, but a lot of these structures house a lot of businesses that employ a lot of people in the city of Longmont. So how do we remain conscious of that as we're doing all these big, grand things and create opportunities to retain those businesses, and whether it be in the corridor and other parts of the city.
Yeah, that's that balance, right? You don't want to cut current industry in order to build potential industry that's not here, right? So how do you balance that? Assist.
When you get two big opportunities as dumbbells, we were talking about on either end of the river, with the fairgrounds on one end, Dickens Park, you know, that's under construction now, and then tying that all together with a trail system, and ultimately maybe a trolley system or some other things, that you have widespread connectivity where people are out of their vehicle and can stay out of their vehicle for an extended period of time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I just build on that a little bit? One of our ideas was also to take that trail system, so anywhere you are in Longmont, you can get to First and Main on that trail, which also gives people the ability to be able to walk and bike so much easier. So that heart of the town where we're trying to have this redevelopment, you can get out and hook up to other places.
Yeah, everywhere.
Like arteries from the heart.
So,
beautiful, Bonnie.
so from both of those, we could put a layer of entrepreneurship on top of that and said, can you create a transportation innovation district that both relieves regulation, but at the same time encourages folks to say, maybe it has to do with our next life, that says, how can you network these things together so that you know, run up and down the corridor with a brand new company and idea that none of us have thought about, that says, how can I do this from anywhere from 100 yards to a half mile to the full run, but test these technologies and so that you can say, does this work, and bring companies and bring ideas to the space to go and do.
You wrote it down that way, right? Transportation Innovation Center?
It's on district, it's on that as well.
I can't look at that, I'll make sure there are other folks that want to pursue it.
We talked about sort of interest convergence. So rather than spending so much time discussing all the areas where it's free, finding areas where it's free, and collaborate for a big project.
Yeah. And you can already kind of hear where people are feeling some of the themes that you all have talked about, even though you're in different groups.
And if you have a trail, you know, you have a trail system through and along the river, have an app on your phone that when you have your phone with you, it'll ding when you hit, you know, okay, if you look to your right, you'll see a
an owl nest, or if you look to your left, this is where the Indians did this, or, you know, as you go along the river, you'll have different educational pieces along the river so that you can learn as you take your walk.
I want to make sure you two have already spoken. Hang on one second. Make sure anybody who hasn't spoken.
The only thing that, we have two boards. One is there's geographic specific, I don't want to say little ideas, big ideas, right? But there are actually questions that I think that if we had one more board, it would be the questions we need to decide as a community as we move forward. Because I imagine, I'm imagining, I could be wrong, but I imagine some of these ideas, even though we just as a council adopted, you know, a new land use code and height, density, etc. Some of these big ideas will probably be bigger than what our current code allows for. Meaning, if we're going to have this facility where there's an educational and a residential and commercial component, whether it's Front Range or whether it's a state university partnership, or whether it's a performing arts center, right? A performing arts center that will be a conference center, hotel, you know. The question is, you know, growth versus no growth, gentrification versus reasonable housing prices. And there will be a tension there that I think that the community needs to be brought into. And so that's just the question. You know, where on the scale, growth, no growth, are we talking? Because when developers come in, I assume that if you're limited to 4 stories, you're not going to be able to build that big of a convention center or university or so how big are we willing to go? Because big is not just ideas, but big is also size physically. And there are people that will have a problem with that. There are people that say, no, we don't care. So where's the scale? Where's the spectrum?
That's a good point.
And we don't need to answer that today. I know,
No, but that could be part of the community involvement process. Where's the scale? All right, you got, oh wait, you had something. Go ahead, Ed.
Just one thing I keep thinking about is Longmont going to become a tourism destination, or are you building this all for your residents? And I think that's a distinction you all have to make.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's come up. I haven't heard tourism, but that's kind of what I've been thinking about.
That's a good question, right? As far as we continue. Yeah.
So just to kind of piggyback on what was just said, we also have to look at the bottom line of the developers, because they're not going to develop something that is just going to be for the residents. It's not going to bring them in money to pay for this, honestly. So what Ellen brought up that I hadn't thought of is that these are great ideas, but we need a market analysis to see if it's even going to go over. I mean, it's great to have a great convention center or a performing arts center. And we know that there isn't a big one in this area, but is there really a market for that? And I think we need to go down that line. We don't want to build things that sit empty.
Did y'all put that on there so that we have that as the balance?
Go ahead, write that up. Go ahead.
Last two, we're gonna let these two have the last word.
My question is, how are we gonna build into this great plan, security, and the pressure on city services? Nobody's talking about that. And so those are two important aspects that we have to consider, because we can have the greatest plans in the world, and if the city can't afford to do it, then what the heck's the purpose? And if it's not safe, nobody's going to come.
So making sure that whatever we do is secure and is sustainable.
Yeah, and that means that Mike Butler and his people need to be intimately involved in at least looking at what we're thinking about, and them starting to think about it, as well as Public Works and, you know, all of that.
I would just like to say that I think whatever solutions we come up with here, they need to be in a context of long-term thinking. We're looking beyond 5, 10, 20 years. We're looking 50, 100 years ahead. We're looking at global trends like climate change and sustainability and a transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy, from car-oriented society to a people-oriented society. And the digital information economy that's going to wipe out 50, 60% of the jobs that exist today. That whatever we do takes in these big macro trends of society and a long-term vision.
Well, I see more people want to. There's one thing that I think. I want to sort of stop reality real quick because I think we're diving right towards the reality area, which is great, and we're going to get there. I promise we will get there. But for right now, I want to try to keep it up at that very, very high level.
I'd like to make an argument for forgetting about reality.
There you go.
Okay.
I do that all the time.
Yeah.
Sort of how I live my life.
We're coming to
Right. No, but one of the aspects of the foundational seed concepts that we started with here is that they bring in more wealth than they do population. And that gives us an advantage in the sense that I think of it as a terrarium that we're going for. You know, we want something that is self-sustaining, where people go from apartments to starter houses to bigger houses and then maybe back down again as they age. And it's an economy that does not strain at the seams the way Boulder has. It's an economy that gets its funding from sustainable things like learning, innovation. Always will have to happen, you know. Urban sprawl doesn't have to happen, and what we need to do is architect this city so that it doesn't have to happen.
Okay, one last comment. Kimberly gets the final floor.
Woohoo!
Go, Kimberly.
I just want to say, at our Building Better Cities, when we talked to developers, really they said that Longmont is one of the remaining cities on the Front Range that can stay its own unique independent city and not come into this kind of sprawling, big, continuous suburb. And this is where we can make that mark. So I think the reality is if we don't make that mark here in this river corridor, kind of first and main area, we are at risk. So I think these decisions are very important. So when you talk about that balance, I think we have to remain a place that people want to come in a destination that's not just a suburb.
I'd like to turn it back over to Councilmember Waters to close it all out. But you'll be hearing from us with all of the information that you came up with, as well as an invitation for our next meeting once we kind of plan what those steps particularly look like. So,
Thanks, Sandy. Nice job.
thank you.
I just want to say to everybody who's in the room and hopefully we had a chance to thank those who had to get on to other things, how much we appreciate keeping this on your calendars. You could have been anywhere today, but you chose to be here, which honors us, honors the city. I hope we made the morning worth your time. Number two, if anybody ever doubted that we're smarter together than we are individually, you only have to sit and watch today. There's a ton of great ideas that no one of us would have come up with today. But collectively, there's brilliance reflected, I think, and great promise on these boards. Last thing I'll say is this. It goes a little bit back to what Elena was saying. We talked about this table. Gordon and I had a chance to spend some time in China a couple months ago. And while I would never trade off our system for the Chinese system, for all kinds of reasons, you can't have that experience without understanding what happens, what's the potential when a population takes collective action. Now, in that case, it's because one or two people decide they're going to take collective action. So I'm not suggesting that. But if I take that with what Tom Friedman and Mike Mandelbaum wrote about in their book, That Used to Be Us, they wrote about what differentiated America from countries around the world was the ability of Americans to take collective action, which we no longer seem to have. Our politics are so fragmented. When you look around and say, what have we done as big and bold as a country? What differentiates us as a country? What are the countries today? And it seems taking collective action might not be at the national level what differentiates us, but it could differentiate us as a city. Taking collective action here is going to differentiate Longmont from Boulder, from Denver, from Fort Collins. You know, as we're writing that prospectus for the Opportunity Zone, and we describe where we are in relationship to them, let's flip that and talk about where they are in relationship to us. That we're the hub of this, if we choose to be. But we're going to need everybody who's here and everybody who left. If we're going to take collective action, we need all these views. No matter how much we might disagree on, we've got to find some things to get together we agree on. And we need everybody who was here today to stay with this process. And I know it's tedious, and if you're a CEO and you get a chance to just run with things, you don't have to worry about this kind of process. It might feel like a drag. But I hope you'll stay with the process, because we're gonna get to a place where at least we tee it up for our next council to get a running start on what's gonna matter to this community for the next 100 years. That's Tim Waters' perspective, and I hope it's shared by some of you in the room. Hopefully we'll see you back here on February 15th. We'll confirm that day. Thanks again, safe drive home. Thanks, Mark.